environment and get burned by fluctuating gas prices. One company hoping to meet that demand is Lucid.
And we are back from our short break. And now we are talking about a topic that's special. It is really special to me, very dear, because I believe there is a lot to do and to act on this topic. We will discuss unlocking the power of packaging compliance, waste less, spend less, worry less. Because, you know, given the current scramble for space on vessels, importers, transporters, they must minimize any empty space shipped through their supply chains. And now we'll see a little bit more on how international retailers have implemented some really good strategic initiatives to save costs, yes, and realize sustainability improvements. And now we'll have Aitor Marroquin, who is the key account director at EV Cargo Technology. And Aitor is responsible for driving customer experience across key accounts and for business growth in Australia and New Zealand, helping global retailers optimize operations and bring innovation to their supply chain. So, Aitor, thank you so much for coming. And if you can run us through the topic, it would be fantastic.
Thank you, Flavio, very much for the introduction. I hope everyone can see my screen. I'll kick it off. So as Flavio mentioned, we'll be talking about how to unlock the power of packaging compliance through wasting less, spending less, and worry less. So the talk will be around 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll jump into the panelist session. So today we're going to be covering, in terms of agenda, we'll kick off with introduction. So I'll just very quickly introduce myself and EV Cargo, even though we've kind of gone through that already, so I won't spend too long on that. We'll jump into the topic overview. I'll pose a question to everyone to think about in regards to today's topic. And then we'll jump into the topic of today, which is sustainability. As we know, this is one of the main conference themes. We'll be focusing on especially environmental responsibility and talking around how EV Cargo is driving this internally, but also externally with our clients. Then we'll jump into the actual product that we'll be discussing today, which is packaging compliance. We will be talking around a couple of case studies with the international retailers, as Fabio mentioned, and then I'll be finishing off with a quick demo of the actual product on how we're helping clients drive their own sustainability goals. And we'll be wrapping up quickly with some key takeaways at the end of the session. So I hope you enjoy it. So very quickly, myself, so that's a picture of me around a year and a half ago when I arrived into Sydney. So my background has already been explained, but yeah, just very quickly, I'm the key account director for EV Cargo, working within EV Cargo Technology, which is a division for EV Cargo. My experience is on supply chain technology, freight forwarding and shipping line experience. Before arriving into Sydney, I was based in the UK for 8 years, but as you can probably tell by my accent, I'm from Spain originally. My background is predominantly retail focused, so working with global retailers, and also internationally in the way that I've worked in the US, the UK, France, and now Australia. So very quickly about EV Cargo, we are a 1.5 billion logistics and technology group. And our mission is that we manage supply chains for the world's leading brands. So I'll leave it at that at this point in terms of overview of the company. I don't need to go into too much detail right now. Okay, so the question I would like to ask people to think about, it's not a trick question. So what percentage of a company's greenhouse gas emissions and waste can be attributed to its supply chain? So let's review some of the elements that can contribute to this percentage from an environmental responsibility point of view, which is one of the main topics that we will be discussing today. So as we know, material waste contributes towards this percentage. There are different materials being discarded into landfill throughout the life of the product in the supply chain. So that's one element. The other element is transportation emissions, whichever the mode we use it to transport cargo, whether it's sea freight, road freight, trucking, rail freight, they all generate emissions at different levels, but they all do. Warehousing emissions, whether it's a destination or origin, whenever a product is being stored, there's a number of emissions being generated from those warehouses. Manufacturing pollution, whether it's emissions, water, energy, waste, you name it. So all of those elements that are created from an emissions and waste point of view when it comes to manufacturing, fuel consumption, so transportation and production or any other part of the supply chain where fuel is being consumed. And lastly, packaging, not just the cartons where the package is being stored, but also looking at the wrapping, the packaging, the labeling, every material being used and thrown into the supply chain. So all in all, this can add up to 95% of a company's greenhouse emissions and waste coming from the supply chains. The supply chain, as I think I've heard in different talks in this conference, sometimes can be a bit of an afterthought, but there is a huge opportunity and a huge percentage to go after in terms of reducing the environmental impact that company supply chain are driving. So today we're going to be discussing how to tackle part of this, or how to try to minimize through specific products this environmental impact. Okay, so before we do that, I just wanted to give you a high-level overview of EV Cargo's own sustainability strategy. So we are operating under one umbrella, which is under the motto of doing well, but doing good. Our goal is an ambitious one, to be Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon neutral by 2030. As many of you may know, Scope 1 and 2 are defined as per the greenhouse gas protocols. Scope 1 being direct emissions of a company, and Scope 2 being electricity from an indirect emissions point of view. We have a number of pillars. We have the planet pillar and the people pillar, and we have a number of a number of objectives and key measures against each of those pillars. I won't go through each of them in detail, but it's just to give you an overview of the areas that we are driving internally. So within the planet section, we've got emissions, waste, and supply chain with their own objectives and measures against them. So measuring is very important. And from a people perspective, we got diversity and inclusion, compliance, and community, again with their own objectives and key measures against them. And we are following and subscribing to a number of international pillars, which I'm going to be covering in the next slide, but they're also at the bottom of this slide down here. So the sustainability pillars that we subscribe to are four. First one is the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, which have been covered throughout this conference. We are following 7 in particular, which we feel we have the strongest influence and connection to. So I won't read them one by one, but those are the ones in the screen. They are the ones that we feel we can influence from an EV Cargo point of view. We are also pledged to join the UN Global Compact last year in 2021. So we joined the thousands of other companies globally to pledge to the United Nations that we will follow the UN Global Compact principles to drive sustainability. As you may know, these are 4 different categories: human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. We are also following the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which basically supporting companies setting ambitious science-based emissions reduction targets. So all the reduction targets that we are targeting, we are using these measurements to make sure that we are in line with international standards. And also we have our own ESG, or environmental, social, and corporate governance performance indicators in 3 pillars, which we've discussed before: governance, people, and planet. Now, some of the success stories, again, managing driving sustainability within Scope 1 and 2 internally. We've achieved a number of them already. I won't go through them in a lot of detail, but just to give you a high-level overview of some of them. So there's 3 buckets. The first one is network efficiency. So things like empty miles, cube fill, packaging, model shift, or route compliance are some initiatives that have already been implemented internally. Next bucket is emissions efficiency. things such as electric fleet. So in the UK, for example, we've rolled out a number of electric trucks. We're looking into the aerodynamics of all the vehicles, fuel economy, alternative fuels, energies, energy use, and so on. And lastly, from a measurement of policies perspective, we have introduced the initiative of removing all single-use plastic within our organization, measuring all the CO2 emissions, driving diversity, establishing policies, and getting the required certification. So this is a number of things that we've done internally. But that was internally, so that is how we're driving things as EV Cargo. But the main question for today is how we helping clients, right? So how we helping all the companies drive their own sustainability. So as you may recall, without going into too much detail, that's scope 3, which is indirect emissions. So in this case, from a technology perspective, within EV Cargo, there's 2 streams in which we are helping clients. One of them is by providing visibility, and the other end is by providing specific software modules on specific processes within our clients. So from a visibility point of view, many companies, it is reported that they actually have limited or fragmented data of their supply chain, whether it's stored across multiple systems or whether is scattered across spreadsheets or sometimes not clearly visible end to end. We are helping, first of all, with our supply chain software by providing end-to-end visibility, by giving clients what we call a one source of truth, which is basically connecting all the stakeholders and data points into one platform. So customers can look at the supply chain and analyze that data to drive sustainable initiatives. So that's the very basic step. Step 1, give them visibility of the data. Step 2 is giving them supply chain control, so not just access to that data, but being able to influence shipments, influence cargo, influence product while easing the supply chain. So being able to consolidate, being able to drive again multiple initiatives while the shipments are live within the supply chain. And lastly, by providing analytics driven decision making, where based on the historic data, we're able to generate based on predictive analytics and support clients and customers on making current and future decisions based on insights that are important for them. So not only they can see the data, they can influence it, we are also helping them towards giving them summarizing and interpreting that data on their behalf so they can drive those initiatives. Now we have a number of modules, software modules, but I'm going to mention just 3 that are relevant to this topic. So the first one is supplier setup. So supplier setup is a specific module that helps clients manage factories and suppliers. Another module we offer is ethical trade. This one supports the management of audits and standards within factories at origin. And the last one is packaging compliance. This is the topic that we're going to be discussing a bit more in detail in the second half of this presentation. And all of these areas, both providing visibility and the modules, they are actually actively driving supply chain sustainability within our clients, and they are contributing directly or indirectly towards the social or environmental responsibility initiatives. Okay, so talking specifically around packaging compliance, let's review what challenges our clients and the retailers that we work with usually have from a packaging perspective. So first of all, there is a lack of packaging standardization and quality guidelines. This means that some clients have up to thousands of different types of cartons within the supply chain. There is no quality or environmental standards to the materials that they use. So basically, it's a bit of a free flow in terms of which cartons are being used by all of their suppliers. Secondly, poor carton selection, which results in inefficient carton fill. This eventually means that many clients are actually shipping free air within their cartons and within their containers, which means that this is creating inefficient loads throughout the supply chain. Thirdly, low product density leads to high transportation costs and unstable loads, which eventually means that we're shipping more volume than what's needed. So there's one more container in the road, and also the loads are more likely to collapse. So when we put all the cartons together, they can either collapse within the container, or when they arrive to the warehouse, So that low product density is quite dangerous and also costing money. And lastly, all of this adds up to preventable carbon footprint due to poor utilization and wasted space, because eventually this means that there's additional trucks on the road, there's additional containers, there's poor packaging materials being used, and part of this is preventable by optimizing packaging. So how do we go about doing that? So optimizing the packaging compliance. So it's a 4-step process, or 3-step process. So the first one, as a company, we do what we call the packaging design process. So we analyze and engineer the optimal packaging to fit the specific product of a client and specific supply chain. So every product will be slightly different, and every client will have different scope of products that they want to put through the program. So we go into doing the engineering part. This will involve doing audits, modeling, testing, going to the warehouse, and performing different tests to be able to come up with the right level of with the right packaging for a specific client. Secondly, once we decide what the best packaging would be, we go into the optimization and integration phase at source. So engaging with vendors and factories globally to increase the product density, reduce the damage, and increase cost. Now, this is a very important part because we need to get all the suppliers and vendors, there can be hundreds of them, on board. Usually we do this at source, so at the origin countries where the product is being sourced from. There is training, there is engagement, there is buy-in from those suppliers, and so it's very important to be able to roll out this program with them. Thirdly, managing compliance. So once we've established the right level of packaging and we've rolled it out through different origins with the different vendors and suppliers, we need to manage that the standards are being adhered to, and this needs to be done in the most efficient way through a system. And that's where we have our packaging compliance module, which provides visibility and control. So not just visibility, but also control within one platform, connecting all stakeholders globally. And this is very important for retailers to actually realize all the savings and realize all the CO2 reductions that they are targeting by being able to enforce and to monitor this compliance through a system. Doing it manually is not efficient, and it takes a heavy admin burden in many organizations if they try to do it manually, basically with the spreadsheets. So all of this helps directly towards improving the environmental responsibility. One second. Towards improving the environmental responsibility of our customers, and by reducing the waste, packaging materials, the volume shipped, and the carbon footprint. So contributing towards some sustainable development goals. So number 12 and number 13, which are, as we remember, sorry, just moving the camera away, which is in the middle. There you go. This contributes directly towards some of the initiatives. Number 12, which is responsible consumption, and number 13, which is climate action. The United Nations Global Compact, 7, 8, and 9, which we know are the ones related to the environment, and also towards science-based targets. So this packaging program is directly influencing and contributing towards these global initiatives. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of case studies quite quickly. So the first one is Primark. As you may know, the company is a global fast fashion retailer operating in Europe and globally as well. So in 2019, they won the Environmental Improvement Award for their initiative to reduce volume of shipped cargo and the quantity of corrugated material that they had within their supply chain. So they engaged with us. They went through the process that I just described in the previous slide, where we went through the design process and implemented the system. And we did the rollout with them towards the top suppliers. The top suppliers, they accounted for around 75% of all the global volume. So that was a targeted approach that we used with them. And then we rolled out, as I mentioned, the system, which was crucial in order to support the ongoing success of the program and monitoring and enforcing compliance of the new standards. So we went through all the steps that I described on the previous slide. Let's look at some of the results in numbers of this program. So in 1 year alone, this is some of the numbers that we achieved with them. So we increased the product density by 14%. We increased the container utilization from 74% to 85% on average. There was 1 million fewer square meters of corrugated material being produced. So this is a net reduction of cardboard material in the supply chain combined. So this wasn't used at all within the supply chain anymore. 40,000 less cubic meters shipped. The warehouse pallet density went up by 24%, and overall 6 million kilos of carbon dioxide were saved as a result of all the volume that was produced and as a result of this program. So these numbers are pretty significant, as you can see, and this is one of the examples. The other example is M&S, Marks & Spencer's, which is a British multinational retailer. Many of you may know as well. They operate department stores and supermarkets. M&S, they launched their own program, 3-year program, to optimize packaging, targeting 15% cost reductions. So differently to Primark, M&S did the analysis and the packaging design in-house. So that's an area that they covered internally within themselves. However, we did support them to the compliance part from a software perspective. So we implemented our software with M&S to be able to manage the standards that they had introduced through their analysis. And since they implementing the system, so M&S, in terms of number of cartons that I mentioned before, they had around 3,800 different carton types at the beginning of the program, being within their supply chain, and they reduced all of these down to just 10 and achieved a 99% reduction of the number of cartons within the supply chain under 8 weeks. Some of the results from this program, we got good feedback from M&S. It's on our website. I won't read it to you, but it's down here on this slide. And some of the numbers, they were able to improve container utilization to 95%, achieved around 1,000 fewer TEUs movements in a year. So that's 1,000 20-foot equivalent containers less being moved altogether for the same amount of product. So almost 1,000 less trucks unless you move 20 foots in one truck. But you can picture 1,000 less boxes being moved altogether. And from a lead time perspective, the carton confirmation lead time was reduced from 72 hours to just a few minutes. So that was a big improvement for them. Okay, so let me show you very quickly the software solution. This is going to be a very high level overview. I only got a few minutes left, but just to give you a feel as to how it looks and what it does for for our clients. But before I do so, I'm just going to show you quickly the workflow. This solution was built for retail. We've worked with retailers on this program. However, there's no reason why this couldn't be scalable to other sectors and other industries in the future. In terms of the process, I won't go through every single step down here, but it is basically a platform that puts together the different stakeholders that need to take part on the authorization and approval process of the packaging standards. You'll find we got different players in here. We got the retailer system, we got the supplier who drives the process, and then within the customer or within the retailer, we got 2 different types of user groups. So the packaging compliance admin user or the packaging compliance manager user that handles escalation. So throughout the workflow, I won't go through it in detail. This will all be set up based on the cartons, the matrix that was agreed as part of the analysis, tailored to specific factories, tailored to specific catalogs and number of users that will be using the system. And overall, they will be going through an approval and process or out to approval process based on some criteria to be able to manage the compliance of all of the suppliers globally in order to keep the standards as per the program. So if I quickly jump into, I hope you can still see my screen, but if I quickly jump into here, you'll be able to see this is what a supplier will be able to see once they log into the system. They'll have different modules that they can access. In this case, we're going to be looking at packaging compliance, but there are other modules like brief and quote or analytics that we discussed before. So from a packaging compliance perspective, when you're a user, every user will have visibility to different dashboards based on your access. So if you're a packaging admin or if you're a packaging escalation point, your screen will look slightly different. But in this case, as a supplier, you will be able to control and look at all the different orders that are available to you within your supply chain. So every supplier will have access to their orders specifically. When you're a packaging admin, for example, you get visibility to every single order within your supply chain. Overall, suppliers can either follow the dashboards or go through different tools to manage the process. There's 4 steps in this case where they need to get the packaging confirmed, they need to get approval, approved or rejected, and it can be escalated as well. There's a bit of a traffic light system in here where suppliers can see which orders and products are critical. So in this case, if a supplier clicks on these specific 3 orders that are critical, within this screen, the selection screen, they'll be able to select, they'll be able to have access to a level of shipment level information, product level information for them to be able to select which orders they need to put through the process. So they can see, for example, the linen shirts in this case, the pink, the size and so on. So they can choose which orders they want to go through. They will go into the update section. And this is where, based on the predefined results of the analysis, the supplier will be able to select whether they are submitting a request for box cargo or hanging cargo, or a standard carton type or a casting carton type. If it's a standard carton type, they will be able to select a predefined number of cartons or from a drop-down menu that will pre-populate all of the information in this screen. They will need to put all the measurements. They will need to put all the quantities, the units per carton, the price as well. This is if it's not being pre-populated by the predefined menu of cartons. And at some point, for example, the suppliers will also have to update photos if that is the required process agreed between the supplier and the merchant. And the retailer. And they will need to upload pictures, for example, to get the approval process. So this is very, so once it's all submitted, you will go into a complete screen, and then you will complete this one step. So this is just one step that I've shown you. There are many different steps within the supplier. So just going back to the same screen. There are many different steps that need to be followed from a packaging admin point of view, from a packaging compliance user point of view, but this is just to give you a very high-level overview of the system, of how it looks and feels. So just to wrap up, so just slide moving into the takeaways. So as we saw, supply chain emissions, they are a significant part of a company's greenhouse emissions that can be attributed directly or indirectly to the supply chain. So we saw in some cases up to 95%. There's a great opportunity throughout the supply chain to drive sustainability initiatives in line with the international pillars that we discussed, such as the UN Global Compact or the SDGs. And we've seen specifically throughout this presentation that packaging compliance as one product, as an example, this has proven success on reducing the amount of waste, footprint, and cost for retailers. And there are learnings from our from the retailers that we work for and with, and this can definitely be applied across industries. So it's not specific to retail only. So I think I've run out of time, but I think is the end of my presentation. So I think almost just in time. So thank you all for your time. I'll be joining the panel discussion now. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Aitor. Yes, we are always running out of time. There's not enough time to do all the interesting